She only wanted to celebrate her son's small victory, but instead, the whole room stared as the hostess turned them away. No table, no welcome. Then, from the corner, a quiet voice. "There's room at my table. One seat, one act of kindness, and it changes everything." She's offered a chance to build something beautiful, but jealous eyes are watching. Rules are twisted, lies are spread, and when her dream is finally within reach, someone sabotages it. Why would a simple open chair make powerful people so afraid? And when the truth comes out, will it set her free or take away everything she loves? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The rain drummed steadily against the windows of Café, creating a gentle rhythm that contrasted sharply with the tense silence inside. Tessa Moore stood near the entrance, water dripping from her worn jacket onto the polished hardwood floor. Her 9-year-old son Eli's hand was warm in hers, his precious spelling bee ribbon slightly damp but still proudly clutched in his other hand. The cafe's interior was exactly as Tessa had imagined. Elegant crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over cream-colored walls, and the aroma of fresh-baked pastries and expensive coffee filled the air. Small round tables draped with crisp white linens dotted the space, at least 3 of them conspicuously empty. "Mom," Eli whispered, his eyes wide with excitement, "it smells just like your kitchen when you're baking." Tessa squeezed his hand, trying to steady her nerves. She'd saved up for weeks to treat Eli to this special celebration, tucking away a few dollars here and there from her catering orders. Her son had worked so hard for that spelling bee ribbon, practicing his words late into the night, determined to make her proud. The hostess, a young woman in a pressed black uniform, approached them with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Behind her, Madison Vale, the cafe's manager, watched intently from behind the counter, her perfectly manicured hands clasped in front of her. "I'm sorry," the hostess said, her voice carrying across the quiet cafe, "but we don't have any available tables at the moment." Tessa's heart sank as she glanced at the empty tables. "Oh, but I see several." "Those are reserved," Madison cut in smoothly, stepping forward. Her heels clicked against the floor as she approached. "We have a very strict reservation policy." Eli's grip tightened on Tessa's hand. "But Mom, look at that table right there. Nobody's sitting." "Honey," Tessa whispered, her cheeks burning as she felt the stares of other patrons. A couple in business attire was being seated at one of the reserved tables, their eyes sliding past Tessa and Eli as if they were invisible. The ribbon in Eli's hand drooped. "I thought we were going to have hot chocolate and celebrate," he said quietly, his voice small and confused. Tessa's throat tightened. She'd seen that look before, the same one the hostess wore now, at other establishments. The look that said, without words, that some people didn't belong in certain places. Madison's voice carried an edge of finality. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at the diner down the street. They're much more casual." The words stung like a physical blow. Tessa stood straighter, summoning every ounce of dignity she possessed. "Come on, Eli, we'll find somewhere else to—" "There's room at my table." The voice was gentle but clear, coming from a corner of the cafe. Tessa hesitated, then turned toward its source. An older man sat alone at a table by the window, steam rising from his coffee cup. His kind eyes met hers with an unwavering warmth that made her pause. The scene remains paused at this exact moment, with Tessa looking at the kind stranger while still holding Eli's hand, exactly as requested in the instructions. Daniel Whitaker's corner table offered a perfect view of the rain-streaked windows, transforming the dreary weather into something almost magical. Tessa settled into the comfortable chair he'd pulled out for her, while Eli practically bounced into his seat, his earlier disappointment already fading. "I'm Daniel," the man said, his smile gentle and weathered. "And you two look like you could use something warm to drink." Before Tessa could protest, he caught the eye of a passing server, not the hostile hostess, but a young man who approached with genuine warmth. "Could we get some hot cocoa for this young champion?" Daniel gestured to Eli's ribbon. "And perhaps coffee for his mother?" "Of course, Mr. Whitaker," the server replied, jotting down the order. Eli carefully smoothed his ribbon on the pristine tablecloth. "I got this at the spelling bee today," he announced, pride making his voice stronger. "I came in 3rd place out of the whole school." "3rd place? That's impressive." Daniel leaned forward, showing genuine interest. "What words did you have to spell?" "Oh, I can show you." Eli sat up straighter. "My winning word was perseverance. Perseverance. Perfect spelling." Daniel nodded approvingly. "That's quite a word. Do you know what it means?" "Mom taught me," Eli beamed at Tessa. "It means keeping going, even when things are hard." Tessa felt her eyes grow warm at her son's words. The server returned with their drinks: rich hot cocoa, topped with whipped cream for Eli, and a steaming cup of coffee for her. The china was delicate, with pale blue flowers around the rim. "Would you like to spell some more words?" Daniel asked, stirring cream into his fresh coffee. "I'd love to hear them." "Really?" Eli's face lit up. Few adults showed such genuine interest in his achievements. "Okay, here's another one. Achievement. Achievement. "Excellent," Daniel applauded softly. "You must have studied very hard." While Eli continued spelling words from his B list, Tessa noticed how Daniel listened with complete attention, as if each word was a precious gift. His manner was unpretentious, despite his clearly expensive watch and well-tailored clothes. "You know," Daniel said during a pause in Eli's spelling, "this reminds me of my late wife, Margaret. She loved words, too, but her real passion was cooking for people." "Was she a chef?" Eli asked, carefully wiping whipped cream from his upper lip. Daniel's eyes crinkled with fond remembrance. "Not professionally, but every Sunday after church she'd host these wonderful lunches. Anyone was welcome. Families going through tough times, college students missing home cooking, seniors who lived alone. She believed a warm meal could heal more than just hunger." "That's beautiful," Tessa said softly, thinking of her own grandmother's kitchen and the way it had always been a sanctuary. "Margaret had this saying," Daniel continued, his voice warm with memory. "There's always room at God's table." She made sure there was always an extra chair, just in case someone needed it. Eli nodded seriously. "Like you did for us today." "Exactly like that," Daniel smiled, though Tessa caught a flash of something else in his expression. Perhaps sadness at the way they'd been treated, or remembrance of his wife's kindness. They talked easily after that, about Eli's school, about Tessa's small catering business, about Daniel's memories of community gatherings. The initial awkwardness of their meeting melted away like sugar in hot tea. When their cups were empty and the rain had softened to a gentle mist, Tessa reached for her wallet. Daniel held up a hand. "Please, allow me. It's been a joy to share this table with you both." "That's very kind, but we couldn't," Tessa began. "Consider it a spelling bee celebration," Daniel insisted gently. "Every achievement deserves recognition." At the register, Tessa hung back as Daniel settled their bill. She noticed with surprise that he was also paying several other tabs: a young couple's lunch, an elderly woman's tea and scone, a student's coffee. He did it quietly, without fanfare, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Outside, the air was fresh with rain. Eli jumped in a small puddle, making his mother smile despite herself. "Before you go," Daniel said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a business card, simple and elegant, and pressed it into Tessa's hand. "If you ever need anything." Tessa looked down at the card. In clean, professional lettering, it read, "Whitaker Properties." Below that, "Daniel Whitaker, owner." Her eyes widened as she realized. This kind man owned the very building they stood before, including the café that had tried to turn them away. The afternoon sun filtered through the worn curtains of their small apartment, casting a warm glow over Eli as he sprawled on the living room floor. His spiral notebook lay open before him, colored pencils scattered around like fallen autumn leaves. The familiar scent of cinnamon and butter wafted from the tiny kitchen where Tessa worked her magic. "Mom," Eli called out, his pencil moving with careful precision. "How do you spell welcome again?" "Welcome," Tessa answered, sliding another tray of golden brown cinnamon rolls onto the cooling rack. She wiped her flour-dusted hands on her apron and peered over his shoulder. "What are you drawing, sweetheart?" Eli's face glowed with concentration. "It's a welcome menu. See?" He pointed to the carefully drawn title at the top of the page, decorated with little stars and hearts. "These are all the things we could make to help people feel happy, like Mr. Whitaker did for us." Tessa's heart squeezed as she studied his artwork. The page was filled with colorful drawings of food items, each one labeled in Eli's improving handwriting. There were steaming cups of cocoa, plates piled with cookies, and what looked like a rainbow-colored cake. "And look," Eli continued, pointing to a corner of the page where he'd drawn a chair. "There's always an extra seat, just like Mrs. Margaret used to do." Tessa blinked back sudden tears. Her son's kindness never failed to amaze her. "That's beautiful, honey. You've put so much thought into this." "Can I take a picture of your cinnamon rolls to go with it?" Eli asked, already reaching for Tessa's phone on the coffee table. "They look just like the ones Gran used to make." Tessa nodded, watching as Eli carefully arranged a plate of the fresh-baked rolls. He'd inherited her eye for detail, adjusting the plate until the morning light caught the glossy cream cheese frosting just right. The swirls of cinnamon were visible through the icing, and the edges had crisped to a perfect golden brown. "These are Gran's recipe," Tessa said softly, remembering countless Sunday mornings in her grandmother's kitchen. She always said good food was like a warm hug for the soul. Eli snapped several photos, his tongue poking out in concentration. "This one's perfect," he declared, showing her the best shot. The cinnamon rolls looked professional, like something from a magazine spread. Together, they sat on their worn couch and composed the post. Eli insisted on typing it himself, hunting and pecking at the keys with determination. "Welcome menu by Eli, and Mom's best cinnamon rolls," he read aloud as he typed. "Made with love and happiness." He paused, looking up at Tessa. "Should we add something about always having room for friends?" Tessa hugged him close. "That's perfect, baby, just perfect." They added the photo of the cinnamon rolls and Eli's carefully drawn menu, then shared it to Tessa's small social media account. Usually, her posts about her home baking got a few likes from church friends and former clients from her catering side business. But this post was different. Within the first hour, notifications started pinging more frequently than usual. Mrs. WWW. Laverne from the church choir shared it with the comment, "Best home baker in town. Those rolls remind me of Sunday fellowship." Then Mr. Rodriguez, whose mother Tessa had cared for as a home health aide, shared it to a local food group. Eli watched the numbers climb with growing excitement. "Look, Mom, people really like your baking." More shares followed. The ladies from the prayer group, parents from Eli's school, even some of the local business owners Tessa had catered for. Comments piled up. "Those look heavenly, just like my grandmother used to make. Best home baking in Harbor Village, hands down. When are you opening a shop? We need these in our lives." Tessa tried to respond to each kind comment, her cheeks warming at the praise. She'd always known her baking was good. It had helped supplement their income during tough times. But seeing such enthusiastic responses made her wonder if maybe, just maybe, there could be something more. The phone rang, startling them both. Pastor Joy's name flashed on the screen. "Tessa, I just saw your post." Pastor Joy's warm voice came through the speaker. "Those cinnamon rolls look exactly like the ones your grandmother used to bring to fellowship breakfasts." "Thank you, Pastor." Tessa smiled, remembering how her grandmother had taught her the recipe right in the church kitchen. "That means a lot." "Speaking of the church kitchen," Pastor Joy continued, a hint of excitement in her voice. "You know, it sits empty most evenings, 6 nights a week, that beautiful commercial kitchen just gathering dust." Tessa's heart skipped a beat. The church kitchen was a marvel, all stainless steel and professional equipment. certified for commercial use, but rarely utilized outside of Sunday fellowship and special events. What if, Pastor Joy's voice took on that tone she used when God had planted an idea in her heart. What if we tried something? A pop-up cafe. We could start small, maybe 1 or 2 evenings a week? A pop-up cafe? Tessa repeated, her voice catching. Eli's head snapped up, his eyes wide with hope. The kitchen's already certified, Pastor Joy continued. We could call it a community outreach program. Your baking, your grandmother's recipes. Tessa, think about it. A place where everyone would be welcome. Eli was practically vibrating with excitement, pointing at his welcome menu and nodding vigorously. Would that even be allowed? Tessa asked, her mind spinning with possibilities. Why don't you come by tomorrow after service? Pastor Joy suggested. We can talk details, see if it feels right. No pressure, just exploring the idea. Sunday morning dawned clear and bright, washing away memories of yesterday's rain. Tessa and Eli walked the familiar path to New Hope Baptist Church, their dress shoes clicking against the sidewalk. The white wooden steeple rose above the trees, its weathered cross catching the morning light. Do you think the kitchen is as big as Elan Café's? Eli asked, swinging their joined hands. He'd traded his usual t-shirt for a pressed blue button-down, his Sunday best. Bigger, probably, Tessa said, adjusting her simple floral dress. The church feeds hundreds during fellowship brunches. They climbed the worn stone steps, where Pastor Joy waited by the heavy wooden doors. Her warm smile and colorful dress made her look like a living rainbow against the church's white walls. There's my favorite spelling bee champion. Pastor Joy opened her arms, and Eli rushed in for a hug. And Tessa, those cinnamon rolls in your post look divine. Your grandmother would be so proud. Thank you, Pastor. Tessa smoothed her dress, fighting the nervous flutter in her stomach. Are you sure about showing us the kitchen? I don't want to impose. Impose? Pastor Joy laughed, the sound rich and genuine. Child, that kitchen was built for community. Come on, let me show you. They followed her through the familiar sanctuary, past rows of wooden pews where morning sunlight painted rainbow patterns through the stained glass windows. Instead of turning toward the fellowship hall, Pastor Joy led them down a side corridor Tessa hadn't visited since helping at her grandmother's last church supper. Now, fair warning, Pastor Joy said, fishing a ring of keys from her pocket. It might need a good dusting, but the bones are solid. The heavy door swung open, and Tessa's breath caught. The kitchen was massive, stretching the length of the fellowship hall. Stainless steel gleamed everywhere, professional-grade ovens, refrigerators, prep tables, and a dishwashing station that could handle hundreds of plates. Morning light poured through high windows, making the metal surfaces sparkle. Whoa, Eli whispered, his eyes wide. It's like a restaurant on TV. Everything's certified and up to code, Pastor Joy said, flicking on more lights. We had it all updated 2 years ago for the summer meal program. Those ovens could bake enough for a small army. Tessa ran her hand along the nearest counter, cool metal, smooth beneath her fingers. In her mind's eye, she could see trays of pastries cooling here, cinnamon rolls, fruit danishes, her grandmother's famous sweet potato pie. The prep space is amazing, she murmured, taking in the expansive countertops. And these storage areas. 6-burner stove, double ovens, walk-in, refrigerator. Pastor Joy listed, pointing. Industrial mixer, proof box for breads, everything you'd need. We even have those special racks for cooling delicate pastries. Eli wandered the space, peeking into cabinets and storage areas. Mom, look at all the pans. He pointed to shelves stacked with commercial bakeware. And there's a whole cabinet just for sprinkles. Those are Mrs. Laverne's decorating supplies, Pastor Joy chuckled. She's particular about her cake toppers. Tessa paused at a worn wooden table tucked in the corner. Her grandmother's favorite spot, where she'd taught Tessa to roll out pie crust and measure ingredients by feel rather than cups. The memory of flour-dusted hands and gentle instructions wrapped around her heart like a warm embrace. Your grandmother spent countless hours at that table, Pastor Joy said softly, following Tessa's gaze. teaching anyone who wanted to learn, feeding anyone who was hungry, not just for food, but for connection. I remember, Tessa whispered. How many summer afternoons had she spent here, learning the secrets of flaky biscuits and perfectly seasoned greens? Her grandmother's hands guiding hers, showing her how love could be measured in cups of sugar and pinches of salt. The health department inspects regularly since we serve the summer meal program, Pastor Joy continued. All the certifications are current. We just need to add your food handler's permit to the paperwork. I still have mine from the catering work, Tessa said, her mind racing with possibilities. The kitchen was so much more than she'd imagined. With space like this, "Mom!" Eli called from near the industrial sink. He held up his welcome menu notebook. "Look, there's even a special corner for the welcome table, just like in my drawing." Sure enough, a cozy nook near the fellowship hall entrance would be perfect for greeting guests. Tessa could almost see it. Fresh flowers on checked tablecloths, the scent of coffee and fresh-baked goods drawing people in. "We could start small," Pastor Joy said, watching Tessa's face. "Maybe one evening a week? Test the waters. See how it feels." The church council already approved the concept as a community outreach program. "Really?" Tessa turned, surprised. "They approved it already?" Pastor Joy's eyes twinkled. "Let's just say I had a feeling about this. The council loves the idea of the kitchen being used to serve more than just Sunday fellowship, especially after hearing about what happened at Elan." Tessa's cheeks warmed, remembering yesterday's humiliation. But here, in this sun-filled kitchen that held so many precious memories, that pain felt distant. "What do you think, baby?" she asked Eli, who was already sketching table arrangements in his notebook. "Should we give it a try?" "Yes," he bounced on his toes. "Can we do Friday night, please? I can help set up after school." Tessa looked around the kitchen again, seeing not just equipment and space, but possibility, community, welcome, everything her grandmother had taught her about feeding bodies and souls. "Friday night," she agreed, her voice stronger than she expected. "We could do a simple menu to start: coffee, tea, maybe some pastries and quick breads. And hot cocoa," Eli added firmly. "With marshmallows. For the shy people." Pastor Joy beamed. "Then it's settled. I'll have the paperwork ready after service, and we can work out the details. Now," she checked her watch. "Speaking of service, we should head back. Mrs. Laverne will have my head if we're late for choir warm-up." As they walked back toward the sanctuary, Eli skipping ahead, Tessa felt something settle in her heart. This was right. This was what her grandmother would have wanted, not just baking, but creating space for connection. Here, in this kitchen that had nourished so many, she could build something beautiful, something welcoming, something that would make her grandmother proud. She had no idea that across town, Madison Vale was staring at her phone, jaw tight as she scrolled through the viral post about Tessa's baking. The sweet aroma of vanilla and cinnamon filled Tessa's small apartment kitchen as she pulled another tray of test pastries from the oven. Her hands, dusted with flour, moved with practiced grace as she set the hot pan on a cooling rack. The counter was already crowded with earlier attempts, some perfect, others learning experiences. "How's batch number 4 looking, baby?" she called to Eli, who sat at their small kitchen table doing homework. "They smell amazing, Mom." He looked up from his math worksheet, pushing his glasses up his nose. "Can I be your official taste tester again?" "As soon as they cool down enough," Tessa smiled, checking her notepad where she'd been tweaking her grandmother's recipes. Getting the proportions right for larger batches would take practice. A sharp knock at the door made them both jump. Tessa quickly wiped her hands on her apron, leaving floury streaks across the worn fabric. Through the peephole, she saw a man in a crisp, button-down shirt, holding a clipboard. She opened the door cautiously. "Can I help you?" "Ms. Moore, I'm Inspector Colton Reyes from the Health Department." He showed her an official badge, his expression professional but not unfriendly. "May I come in? We need to discuss a complaint that was filed." Tessa's stomach dropped, but she stepped back to let him enter. Of course. Eli, honey, why don't you take your homework to your room? Eli gathered his papers, casting worried glances between his mother and the inspector as he disappeared down the short hallway. I apologize for the mess, Tessa said, gesturing at her baking experiments. I've been testing recipes. That's actually why I'm here. Inspector Reyes consulted his clipboard. We received a complaint about unlicensed food sales. Your social media post about a potential pop-up cafe was brought to our attention. But I haven't sold anything yet, Tessa protested. I was just exploring the idea. I understand. His tone remained even. However, any food service operation needs proper permits and inspections before opening. This includes pop-ups and temporary locations. He pulled out a thick packet of papers. These are the requirements you'll need to meet: health and safety certifications, food handler permits, kitchen facility standards. Tessa took the packet with slightly trembling hands. The list of requirements seemed endless, each page more daunting than the last. Look, Ms. Moore, Inspector Reyes' voice softened slightly. I can tell you take pride in your work. The kitchen smells wonderful. But rules exist to protect public safety. I understand, Tessa said quietly. What happens now? This is just a warning notice. He handed her an official letter. But if you proceed without proper permits, you could face significant fines. Take time to review everything. If you decide to move forward, my office can guide you through the process. Thank you, Tessa managed, though her throat felt tight. After showing Inspector Reyes out, she sank into a kitchen chair, staring at the stack of papers. The pastries she'd been so proud of moments ago now seemed to mock her. How could she possibly afford all these permits and certifications? Mom? Eli peeked around his doorframe. Is everything okay? Come here, baby. She held out her arms, and he rushed over for a hug. We just hit a little bump in the road, nothing we can't handle. Can I still be your tester? Always. She kissed the top of his head, grateful for his simple faith in her. They spent the afternoon sampling pastries and doing homework, trying to keep their spirits up, but around 4 o'clock, a soft, scratching sound came from the front door. Tessa opened it to find an envelope had been slipped underneath. Her hands shook as she tore it open, already dreading its contents. The eviction notice was printed on harsh white paper, citing multiple late payment errors she knew weren't true. She'd always paid on time, even when it meant taking extra catering jobs to make rent. Eli appeared at her elbow. What's that paper, Mom? Tessa quickly folded the notice and forced a smile. Just some boring grown-up stuff. Hey, why don't you help me box up these extra pastries? Maybe Mrs. Johnson next door would like some. But as Eli cheerfully packed treats into paper bags, Tessa's mind raced. First the permit warning. Now this? It couldn't be coincidence. She'd always been so careful with rent payments, keeping every receipt. She looked at the pile of official papers from Inspector Reyes, then at the eviction notice. The weight of both seemed to press down on her shoulders, threatening to crush the fragile dream of her cafe before it could even begin. The evening air carried a lingering dampness as Tessa walked along the quiet suburban street, borrowed umbrella in hand. She'd gotten Daniel's address from Pastor Joy, and now she stood before a modest 2-story colonial home with well-tended flower beds and a small vegetable garden off to one side. The house wasn't what she'd expected from someone who owned commercial property downtown. No fancy cars in the driveway, no elaborate landscaping, just neat, simple, and welcoming, like the man himself. Tessa hesitated at the bottom of the porch steps. The day's events weighed heavily on her shoulders, and her eyes felt scratchy from holding back tears. She'd left Eli with their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, promising to return quickly, but her feet felt rooted to the spot. The porch light clicked on, and Daniel appeared in the doorway. He wore reading glasses and a cardigan that had seen better days. Tessa? Is everything all right? She climbed the steps, trying to summon a smile. I wanted to return your umbrella and thank you again for your kindness at the cafe. Come in, please. He held the door open. I just made tea. The interior of Daniel's home matched its outside, comfortable but modest. Family photos lined the walls, and a well-worn armchair sat beside a small table stacked with books. In the kitchen, 2 mugs of steeping tea waited on the counter. "I hope I'm not interrupting," Tessa said, placing the umbrella by the door. "Not at all. I was just going through some paperwork." He gestured to the kitchen table. "Please, sit. You look like you could use a friend right now." The simple kindness in his voice nearly undid her. Tessa sank into a chair, wrapping her hands around the warm mug he placed before her. "It's been a rough day." "Tell me," he said, settling across from her. The whole story spilled out. Inspector Reyes's visit, the complaint about unlicensed food sales, the mysterious eviction notice that made no sense. "I keep every receipt, document every payment. There haven't been any errors, but the notice says I have 3 weeks to leave." Daniel listened intently, his expression thoughtful. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer immediate solutions or empty reassurances. When she finished, he removed his glasses and cleaned them with deliberate care. "The timing seems rather convenient," he said finally. "A complaint and an eviction notice on the same day." "I can't help thinking it's connected to the Café incident." Tessa stared into her tea. "But I don't understand why anyone would go to such lengths to stop a simple pop-up dinner at a church." "Some people fear change," Daniel said quietly, "especially when it challenges their idea of how things should be." He folded his hands on the table. "I want you to know something, Tessa. I've been in this town for 40 years. I've seen how certain establishments maintain their particular atmosphere." His careful choice of words made Tessa's chest tighten. She knew exactly what he meant, the subtle ways some places kept out those they deemed undesirable. "My late wife, Margaret," Daniel continued, "she used to say that a truly welcome table has no dress code and no membership fee. She believed that with her whole heart." He paused, studying Tessa's face. "What you're trying to do with these pop-up dinners, it matters. And if you want to fight this, we'll fight it right." Tessa blinked rapidly. "I don't know if I have the strength for a fight." "You won't be fighting alone," Daniel's voice was firm. "Let me look into these supposed payment errors. As for the health department complaint, there are proper channels for addressing that. Pastor Joy knows quite a few people on the town council." "I can't ask you to get involved," Tessa protested. "You've already done so much." "You're not asking. I'm offering." He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "Margaret would never forgive me if I sat back and watched this happen." Tessa left Daniel's house feeling lighter than she had all day. The borrowed umbrella stayed behind. Daniel insisted she keep it, saying the weather report predicted more rain. As soon as Tessa was gone, Daniel picked up his phone and dialed a familiar number. When Pastor Joy answered, his voice was calm but determined. "Joy, it's Daniel. We need to talk about Tessa more. If she wants to fight this, we'll fight it right." The warm glow from the fellowship hall's windows spilled onto the darkening sidewalk as evening settled in. Inside, the air hung thick with the aroma of fresh-baked cinnamon rolls and rich coffee. Tessa stood at the kitchen counter, carefully arranging another batch of rolls on a serving tray, her hands moving with practiced precision. "Now don't you worry about a thing, honey," Laverne Pitts called out as she bustled past with a stack of plates. "I've got everything under control out here." The retired school secretary had taken charge of organizing the volunteers with cheerful efficiency, assigning tasks with the same authority she'd once used to wrangle students. "Mrs. Pitts, where should I put these napkins?" A teenage girl in a neat church dress held up a box. "Right by the coffee station, Sarah, and make sure to fill those sugar bowls while you're there." Laverne adjusted her flowered apron and consulted her clipboard. "Now where did I put that serving schedule?" In the corner of the fellowship hall, Eli had claimed a low table, carefully arranging boxes of crayons and stacks of paper. His Hope Menu sketchbook lay open as inspiration, showing his colorful drawings of welcome signs and happy faces. He'd insisted on making a special area where kids won't feel scared to come in. "How's the kid corner coming along, sweetheart?" Tessa called out, watching her son's focused expression as he positioned everything just so. Eli looked up with a bright smile. "Almost perfect, Mom. I made signs that say, 'Draw your dream dessert,' and 'Color your perfect pizza.'" He held up one of his creations, letters carefully drawn in rainbow colors. The first guests began trickling in just as Tessa pulled the last batch of rolls from the oven. She heard Pastor Joy greeting people at the door, her warm voice carrying across the room. "Welcome, welcome! Please come in and make yourselves comfortable." Mr. Chen, the retired violinist from down the street, sat up in a corner near the entrance. The sweet notes of Amazing Grace filled the air as he drew his bow across the strings, adding a gentle backdrop to the growing buzz of conversation. "Tessa, dear," Laverne appeared in the kitchen doorway. "We've got our first table ready for service. Are those rolls cool enough to send out?" Coming right up. Tessa carefully transferred the perfectly glazed rolls onto a serving platter. Through the kitchen window, she could see the fellowship hall filling up quickly. Families with children, elderly couples, and single adults all mingled together, creating a warm tapestry of community. A retired banker she recognized from town sat at a table with a young mother and her 3 children. He quietly slipped some bills into the donation box, then whispered something to Laverne about covering the next few meals for anyone who needed it. Eli darted between tables, offering crayons and welcome smiles to other children. His natural warmth seemed to break the ice for shy newcomers, especially the kids who clung to their parents' legs at first. "Want to help me design a super sundae?" She heard him ask a quiet girl in pigtails. The hall hummed with life. The clink of coffee cups, bursts of laughter, the scratch of chair legs on the floor as people made room for newcomers at their tables. Mr. Chen had switched to playing "This Little Light of Mine," and a few voices joined in humming along. "These rolls are just like my grandmother used to make," an elderly woman told Tessa as she passed by with a fresh pot of coffee. "Brings back such sweet memories." Tessa felt a warm glow in her chest as she watched people helping themselves to seconds, sharing stories across tables, and making space for latecomers without hesitation. This was exactly what she'd hoped for. Not just feeding people's bodies, but nurturing their spirits too. Inspector Reyes had stopped by earlier to check their setup and permits. He'd nodded approvingly at their organized system and clear health safety protocols. "Keep this standard," he'd said with a small smile, "and you won't have any problems from my department." Daniel sat at a corner table, quietly observing the scene with satisfaction. He caught Tessa's eye and gave her a thumbs up as she passed with a fresh carafe of coffee. She noticed him taking notes in a small notebook, probably working on ideas for the future. The evening settled into a comfortable rhythm. Laverne's volunteer system worked smoothly. Dirty dishes disappeared efficiently, coffee stayed hot and plentiful, and no table went unwelcomed or unserved. Even the teenagers helping out seemed to be enjoying themselves, joking with guests as they cleared plates and refilled water glasses. Just as Tessa emerged from the kitchen with a fresh tray of rolls, the fellowship hall's front door opened again. Madison Vale stepped inside, clutching an Elan Café to-go cup. She paused, just inside the entrance, her designer boots clicking to a stop on the polished floor. Her eyes narrowed as they swept across the room, taking in every detail, from the mismatched chairs to the paper plates, from the crayon-covered kids' corner to the donation box by the coffee station. The Saturday morning sun cast long shadows across Main Street as shop owners unlocked their doors and swept their storefronts. Sarah Chen, who ran the florist shop next to Elan Café, noticed the glossy new flyers first. They were everywhere, taped to lampposts, slipped under windshield wipers, and prominently displayed in shop windows. Tessa was walking Eli to his weekend art class when Sarah hurried over, clutching one of the blue and gold papers. "Tessa, wait, you need to see this." The flyer announced in elegant script, "Introducing Elan Café's exclusive members brunch." Below that, detailed bullet points spelled out the new policies. Proper attire required. No athletic wear. No children under 10 on weekends. Reserved seating for members only. But it was the bottom section that made Tessa's stomach clench. Under a heading marked, "Public Safety Notice," careful wording suggested that unregulated pop-up food services posed health and safety risks to our community. Eli peered at the paper. "Mom, what does unregulated mean?" Tessa's hands trembled slightly as she folded the flyer. "It's just a fancy word, baby." She squared her shoulders and managed a smile. "You better hurry or you'll be late for art class." "I can walk him," Sarah offered, reading Tessa's expression. "You look like you could use a minute." After they left, Tessa sank onto a nearby bench. More people were stopping to read the flyers now. Mrs. Dote Peterson from the library shook her head as she pulled one down. "Shameful," she muttered, catching Tessa's eye. The morning grew warmer as Tessa walked home, noticing how the flyers seemed to be everywhere she looked. Outside the grocery store, she overheard two women discussing them. "Well, I heard that church kitchen isn't even inspected regularly," one said. "Such a shame," replied the other. "Those cinnamon rolls looked good too." In her tiny apartment kitchen, Tessa spread the flyer on the counter next to her permit application papers. The health department forms seemed to multiply every time she looked at them. Inspector Reyes had been clear. She needed proper licensing to continue, but the application fees alone. Her phone buzzed with a text from Pastor Joy. "Don't let them shake you. We're doing everything by the book." Tessa started to reply, but another text came through. This one, from Daniel Whitaker. "Meeting tomorrow after service. Bring your paperwork." The day crawled by. Tessa tried to focus on her regular Saturday baking orders, but her hands kept shaking. Every time the phone rang, she jumped, expecting more bad news. When Eli returned from art class, his face was serious. "Jimmy's mom saw the flyers. She said she can't come to our cafe anymore because it might not be safe." Tessa set down her mixing bowl. "Come here, baby." She pulled him close, breathing in the familiar scent of crayons and kid shampoo. "Sometimes people say things without knowing the whole story. But we are safe, right?" Eli's voice was muffled against her apron. "You always make me wash my hands and wear gloves when I help." "That's right, and Pastor Joy makes sure everything in that kitchen is clean and proper." They spent the evening working on homework and watching Eli's favorite cartoon. But after his bath, as Tessa tucked him into bed, he grabbed her hand. "Will they take away our cafe, Mom?" Tessa gathered him into a tight hug, her throat too tight to answer. The middle. The church kitchen gleamed in the early morning light as Tessa wiped down the stainless steel counters. She hummed along with the worship music playing softly from her phone, checking items off her own handwritten to-do list. The weekend's drama with the flyers still weighed heavy, but here in the quiet kitchen she felt a sense of peace. The heavy door creaked open, making her jump. Inspector Colton Reyes stood in the doorway, clipboard in hand. "Good morning, Ms. Moore," he said, his tone professional but not unkind. "I hope you don't mind an unannounced inspection." Tessa's heart raced, but she straightened her apron. "Of course not, Inspector. Please, come in." Reyes moved methodically through the kitchen, making notes on his clipboard. He checked thermometers in the industrial refrigerator, tested water temperatures at the washing station, and examined the seals around windows and doors. His pen scratched against paper as he documented everything. "Your basic food handling certification is current?" he asked, peering at the permits posted on the wall. "Yes, sir. Renewed it last month." Tessa pulled out her wallet and showed him the card. He nodded, making another note. "Good. And you're logging temperatures for cold storage?" 3 times daily. She retrieved her logbook from beside the prep station. "I keep separate sheets for each unit." A slight smile crossed his face as he flipped through the careful records. Very thorough. The inspection continued for nearly an hour. Reyes opened every cabinet, checked every drain, and examined the cleaning supplies storage. Tessa followed, answering his questions and taking mental notes of her own. He paused at the dry goods storage area. "These shelves need to be at least 6 inches off the floor. Current height is only 4. He made a mark on his clipboard. "And you'll need splash guards behind the washing stations." Tessa's shoulders slumped slightly. "Will those issues prevent us from operating?" "Not if you address them promptly." Reyes pulled a printed checklist from his clipboard. "Here's everything you need to bring the kitchen up to code. Most are minor adjustments." He walked her through each item, explaining the requirements in detail. Tessa noted how his professional demeanor softened as he showed her simple solutions for each issue. The shelf height, that's an easy fix, he demonstrated with his hands. Just add some sturdy blocks under the current legs. For the splash guards, any stainless steel sheet metal shop can fabricate what you need. Thank you, Tessa said, studying the list. This is actually really helpful. Reyes hesitated, then spoke in a lower voice. Ms. Moore, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I've seen every kind of kitchen operation you can imagine. He gestured around the room. What you're doing here, it's good work. Clean, organized, professional. Tessa blinked back sudden tears at his words. I received another complaint about your operation this morning, he continued. Anonymous like the first. But I can tell you, the issues they're claiming, I'm not seeing them here. The flyers around town. Tessa started. I saw them. Rhea's expression hardened slightly. Making vague public accusations about food safety without evidence, that's not how legitimate concerns should be handled. He tucked his clipboard under his arm. Get these items addressed within 2 weeks. I'll return for a follow-up inspection then. At the door he paused. And Ms. Moore? Don't let them scare you off. After he left, Tessa sat at the prep station, reading through the checklist again. Each item was clearly explained, with relevant code sections noted. It wasn't nearly as overwhelming as she'd feared. She drove home, stopping at the hardware store for shelf blocks and cleaning supplies. In her small kitchen, she cleared space on the refrigerator, carefully taping the inspection checklist where she'd see it every day. Her fingers lingered on the paper. This wasn't just a list of requirements, it was a path forward. Clear steps she could follow, one by one. She thought of Inspector Reyes's words about her good work and felt a fresh surge of determination. The checklist would be her battle plan. She'd tackle each item systematically, prove she could meet every standard. Let them try to call her operation unregulated then. Standing back, Tessa looked at the checklist, now prominently displayed on her fridge. Each item represented a small victory waiting to happen. She'd show them all what regulated really looked like. Daniel adjusted his well-worn flannel shirt as he waited outside Elan Café. The morning rush had just ended, and he spotted Ava's sleek silver car pulling into a parking space. She emerged in a tailored navy suit, her heels clicking against the pavement. "Dad," she said, giving him a quick hug. "This is unexpected. Your message said it was urgent?" "Thank you for coming." Daniel's eyes crinkled with warmth. "There's something I'd like you to see." They walked the 3 blocks to New Hope Baptist Church, Ava's expression growing more puzzled with each step. The sounds of laughter and clinking dishes drifted from the fellowship hall. "A church basement?" Ava raised an eyebrow. "Dad, I have a conference call in 2 hours." "Just give it 30 minutes, Daniel said quietly. "Please." Inside, the fellowship hall hummed with activity. Checkered tablecloths brightened the tables, and vases of wildflowers added splashes of color. The aroma of fresh-baked bread and coffee filled the air. Tessa moved between tables with a coffee pot, stopping to chat with each guest. She wore a crisp apron over her simple dress, her hair neatly tied back. Several volunteers in matching aprons carried plates of steaming food from the kitchen. "This is what you wanted to show me?" Ava's voice held a note of skepticism. "A charity lunch?" Before Daniel could respond, Eli appeared beside them, clutching his spiral notebook. "Hi! Are you Mr. Daniel's daughter? He said you might come today." His bright smile showed a missing front tooth. Ava blinked, caught off guard by his directness. Yes, I'm Ava." "I'm Eli. Want to sit in the corner seat? That's where the shy folks like to start." He pointed to a quiet table, partially screened by a potted plant. "You can watch everything from there, and nobody bothers you until you're ready." "I'm not shy," Ava said automatically, but Eli was already pulling out the chair. "Mom says everyone's shy sometimes, even grown-ups, especially in new places." He placed a laminated menu on the table. "The cinnamon rolls are really good today." I helped roll them out. Daniel touched Ava's shoulder. "I'll let you get settled. I need to help Laverne with some dishes." Ava opened her mouth to protest, but her father had already disappeared toward the kitchen. She sat down stiffly, feeling out of place in her business attire. Eli pulled out his notebook and showed her his latest drawings. "See? This is my hope menu. I draw what I think would make people happy." The page showed colorful sketches of plates piled with food, surrounded by smiling stick figures. "That's creative," Ava said, studying the childish artwork. Her expression softened slightly. Tessa approached with coffee. "Welcome, you must be Daniel's daughter." "I'm Tessa, Eli's mom." She poured a cup with steady hands. "Cream or sugar?" "Black is fine," Ava said, watching Tessa closely. This was the woman from the viral post, but she carried herself with quiet dignity. As the morning went on, Ava observed the room from her corner vantage point. A retired teacher shared a table with a young mother and her toddler. Two teenagers in fast food uniforms grabbed breakfast before their shift. An elderly man in a veteran's cap sat with a group of construction workers, all of them laughing at some shared joke. Eli brought her a warm cinnamon roll, perfectly glazed. "Try it?" "I watched Mom make the recipe 3 times before she said it was right." Ava took a small bite, then a larger one. The pastry melted in her mouth, rich with butter and spice. "This is excellent," she admitted. "Mom's the best baker ever," Eli beamed. "She says food tastes better when you make it with love." A commotion near the entrance drew their attention. A woman in worn clothes stood hesitating in the doorway, clutching a small child. Laverne immediately went to greet her, guiding her to a table. Within minutes, the woman had a hot meal and her child was coloring with crayons from Eli's kid table. Ava checked her watch, surprised to find an hour had passed. Her conference call would start soon, but she found herself reluctant to leave. The atmosphere was warm, genuine, in a way her corporate meetings never were. She watched an elderly couple share their table with a young man in scrubs, presumably just off a hospital night shift. They passed plates of food and stories with equal generosity. Around her, the room buzzed with conversation and laughter, a patchwork of community stitched together over coffee and kindness. Her phone buzzed with a meeting reminder, but Ava remained in her corner seat, sipping her second cup of coffee. Just a few more minutes, she told herself. Just a few more minutes of this unexpected peace. The autumn breeze rustled fallen leaves as Daniel and Tessa walked down Main Street. They just finished reviewing permit paperwork at the church, and Daniel had insisted on showing her something with potential. "It's just around this corner," Daniel said, his weathered hands tucked into the pockets of his work jacket. He moved with purposeful steps, glancing occasionally at Tessa to gauge her reaction. They turned onto Cedar Street, where most of the storefronts gleamed with fresh paint and window displays, except for one. On the corner stood a 2-story brick building with boarded windows and a faded "For Lease" sign that had clearly seen better days. Daniel stopped in front of it. "What do you see?" Tessa wrapped her cardigan tighter against the chill. "Honestly? A lot of work." She studied the building's bones: solid brick walls, large window spaces under the boards, and a covered entrance that could shelter people from rain. "Look closer," Daniel encouraged, pulling out an old brass key. He unlocked the padlock on the front door and pushed it open with a creak. Sunlight filtered through gaps in the boards, casting strips of light across a dusty floor. The space was huge, easily 3 times the size of the church kitchen. A counter ran along one wall, and despite the layers of dust, Tessa could make out the outline of what had once been a diner. "I've owned this building for 15 years, Daniel said quietly. "Sarah, my wife, always wanted to do something special with it, something that would bring people together." Tessa ran her hand along the counter, leaving trails in the dust. "It must have been beautiful when it was open." It was. Daniel moved to the center of the room. "But I'm not showing you this to reminisce. I have a proposal." He pulled out a folder from his jacket and handed it to Tessa. Inside were architectural drawings, modern kitchen equipment, comfortable seating areas, and a sign that read, "Whitaker Community Kitchen, Open Table." "I want to endow this place in Sarah's name," Daniel continued, his voice soft but clear. Make it a permanent home for what you've started. A real community kitchen where everyone's welcome, where people can learn to cook, share meals, find fellowship. He paused, watching her face. With you as culinary director. Tessa's hands trembled slightly as she looked through the plans. Me? But I'm just the person who turned a church basement into the most welcoming spot in town? Daniel's eyes crinkled. Just the woman who knows how to make everyone feel at home with a cup of coffee and a cinnamon roll? Tessa walked to one of the boarded windows, prying back a loose edge to peek outside. The street was busy with afternoon shoppers, parents pushing strollers, elderly couples walking arm in arm. It's too much, she whispered. The responsibility, the risk. What if I fail? What if I let everyone down? She turned back to Daniel. I'm not a businesswoman. I'm just trying to keep my head above water. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. You know what Sarah used to say? The best meals come from cooks who aren't afraid to mess up the kitchen. He joined her at the window. You've already proven you can do this. The permits, the health inspections, managing volunteers. You've handled it all beautifully. With help, Tessa protested. With you and Pastor Joy and Mrs. Pitts. And you'll have that same help here, more even. This isn't about putting everything on your shoulders. It's about giving your gift a proper home. Tessa looked down at the drawings again. The plans included a corner kids area, just like Eli created at the pop-ups. There was a teaching kitchen, a community dining room, even a small garden space on the roof. The funding is secured, Daniel added gently. Insurance, equipment, staff salaries. It's all part of the endowment. You wouldn't have to worry about making rent or breaking even. Your job would be to make it welcoming, to keep the spirit of what you've created. Tessa's throat tightened. Could I think about it? Of course. Daniel carefully took the folder back. Take all the time you need. The building isn't going anywhere. They locked up and walked back toward the church in comfortable silence. At the corner, Tessa paused. Thank you, she said softly. Not just for the offer, but for believing in me that much. Daniel smiled. Sarah would have loved you, you know. She always said the best food was served with a side of dignity. That night, Tessa lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling. Eli's soft breathing came from the next room, punctuated by distant traffic sounds. Her mind raced with possibilities. She imagined sunny mornings with regulars dropping in for coffee, afternoon cooking classes for kids, elderly neighbors finding companionship over lunch. She could picture Eli doing homework at his special corner table, Mrs. Pitts organizing holiday meals, Pastor Joy saying grace before community dinners. But then darker thoughts crept in. What if she couldn't handle the responsibility? What if people stopped coming? What if Madison was right, and she wasn't qualified to run something so important? The weight of potentially disappointing Daniel, of failing Sarah's legacy, pressed heavy on her chest. She rolled onto her side, watching moonlight pattern her wall through the curtains. The corner building's possibilities danced in her mind, both beautiful and terrifying, as sleep remained stubbornly out of reach. The fellowship hall of New Hope Baptist Church hummed with life on a crisp Friday evening. White tablecloths draped over the usually plain tables, each decorated with mason jars filled with wildflowers that Laverne had gathered that morning. Soft lamplight cast a warm glow over the gathered faces, making everyone look like family. Tessa stood behind the serving counter, adjusting her apron and taking in the scene before her. Her cinnamon rolls sat in neat rows beside Pastor Joy's famous peach cobbler and Mrs. Pitt's butter cookies. The aroma of fresh coffee mingled with the sweet scents of baking, creating an atmosphere that felt like coming home. At the veterans' table, Mr. Thompson, still wearing his Navy cap, shared stories with Mrs. Wilson, whose husband had served in Vietnam. Their laughter carried across the room as teens, in matching aprons, Eli's idea, weaved between tables with slices of pie balanced carefully on trays. "Watch your step there, Jeremy," Tessa called out gently, as one young server nearly collided with a chair. The boy steadied himself, grinning sheepishly. Eli moved between tables with the confidence of someone twice his age, his spiral notebook tucked in his back pocket. He'd drawn special place cards for each table, complete with little welcome messages that made people smile when they sat down. Near the piano, Sarah Martinez, who usually sang at the local coffee house, started another hymn. Her voice rose clear and strong, and soon others joined in. The sound swelled, filling every corner of the room with amazing grace. Daniel stood by the window, his eyes bright as he watched the room. He wore a clean plaid shirt and his best jeans, dressed up in his own humble way. Every few minutes, he'd catch Tessa's eye and nod, as if to say, "See? This is what it's all about." Beside him, Ava moved through the crowd with her phone, capturing moments. She'd traded her usual corporate attire for a simple sweater and slacks, looking more relaxed than Tessa had ever seen her. She paused to photograph Mrs. Pitts, teaching a group of children how to fold napkins into swans, then moved on to capture the veterans sharing stories over coffee. "This is good content," Ava murmured as she passed Tessa. "Real people, real connections. No staging needed." Coming from Ava, it felt like high praise. Through the window, Tessa spotted Madison Vale standing in the church parking lot. The cafe manager hadn't come inside, but she lingered, watching. In the lamplight, her expression seemed more curious than critical. "More coffee, Mrs. Chen?" Tessa asked, moving from behind the counter to check on an elderly woman who sat with a group of widows. They'd formed their own little support group over the past few pop-ups, sharing pictures of grandchildren and trading gentle advice. "Please," Mrs. Chen smiled, holding out her cup. "And maybe one more of those wonderful rolls? My arthritis hasn't bothered me all evening. Must be the good company." As Tessa moved through the room, she felt the warmth of dozens of conversations washing over her. Inspector Reyes sat with his family, his children coloring on the kids' menus Eli had designed. The retired violinist who sometimes played at Elan had brought his instrument, adding soft harmonies to Sarah's singing. Pastor Joy stood up, tapping her glass gently. The room quieted, faces turning toward her with expectant smiles. "Friends," she began, her voice carrying easily, "look around this room. Some of us have known each other for decades. Others are new friends we've just met. But tonight, we're all family." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Eli appeared at Tessa's side, slipping his small hand into hers. "When Tessa and Eli first came to us with the idea of using our kitchen," Pastor Joy continued, "we knew it was more than just about food. It was about creating a place where everyone could feel at home." Tessa felt tears prick at her eyes, as several people turned to smile at her. Mr. Thompson raised his coffee cup in a small salute. "So tonight we're not just celebrating good food, though heaven knows these cinnamon rolls are a blessing." Laughter rolled through the room. "We're celebrating what happens when we open our hearts and our doors, when we say, 'There's always room at this table.'" Daniel moved to stand near Tessa, his presence steady and supporting. Even Ava had stopped taking photos. Her phone lowered as she listened. "To our founders," Pastor Joy raised her glass of lemonade. "To Tessa's courage, to Daniel's vision, to every volunteer who's washed a dish or served a slice of pie. And everyone who's walked through those doors looking for a meal and found a family instead." "To family," the room echoed, raising their cups. The music started again, softer now. Mrs. Chen's knitting needles clicked peacefully as she worked on what looked like a baby blanket. The veterans had pulled out old photos, passing them around their table with gentle hands and knowing nods. Tessa looked around at the faces she'd come to know over the past weeks. The banker who always paid for extra meals quietly. The bus driver who stopped by after his late shift. The young mother who brought her toddlers, knowing they'd be welcomed despite sticky fingers. These people had become more than customers. They were neighbors who asked about Eli's spelling tests, friends who saved recipes for her to try, supporters who showed up with volunteer sign-up sheets and encouraging words when the permit process seemed overwhelming. For the first time since moving to town, Tessa felt the full weight of belonging settle around her shoulders like a warm shawl. This wasn't just a business venture anymore. It wasn't even just about honoring Daniel's wife's memory or proving something to Madison. This was home. Scene 1. Spoiled. The morning sun had barely peeked over the horizon when Tessa pulled into the church parking lot. Her inspection checklist, creased from constant review, sat on the passenger seat beside her purse. She'd arrived 2 hours early, determined to have everything perfect for Inspector Reyes's visit. The fellowship hall was quiet and still as she unlocked the side door, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. She'd left everything spotless the night before. Counters gleaming, floors mopped, equipment sanitized. Even Eli had stayed late to help, carefully arranging the cleaning logs in a fresh binder. Something felt off the moment she stepped into the kitchen. The familiar hum of refrigeration was missing. Her heart dropped as she rushed to the industrial fridge, yanking open the heavy door. Warm air hit her face. No, no, no! She pressed her hand against the containers inside. Everything was room temperature. The batch of custard she'd prepared for today's service, the carefully measured ingredients, the fresh produce, all ruined. Her hands trembled as she traced the power cord to the wall. The plug lay on the floor, definitely pulled out. This wasn't an accident or power failure. Someone had deliberately unplugged it. Tessa checked her phone. 6:45 a.m. Inspector Reyes would arrive at 7:00 sharp. Panic rose in her throat as she plugged the unit back in, but she knew it was too late. Even if it started cooling now, the food had been warm for hours. She opened container after container, the smell of spoiled dairy hitting her nose. The custard had separated, the cream curdled. Vegetables that should have been crisp were now limp and warming. Everything she'd prepared, everything she'd invested in, ruined. The sound of dress shoes on tile made her freeze. Inspector Reyes stood in the doorway, his clipboard already in hand. He was early. "Good morning, Ms. Moore," he said formally, though his eyes showed concern at her obvious distress. "Is everything all right?" Tessa straightened up, trying to keep her voice steady. "Inspector Reyes, someone unplugged our refrigeration unit overnight. I just discovered it." He moved forward, professional mask firmly in place as he checked the temperature gauge. "How long has it been unplugged?" "I don't know exactly. Everything was fine when I left at 9 p.m. last night." She showed him the cleaning log with her signature and timestamp. Reyes pulled out a digital thermometer, testing several items. His face remained neutral, but Tessa could read the results in his careful movements. Everything was well above safe temperature ranges. "Ms. Moore, I have to check all items and document the temperatures." He spoke gently, but firmly. "You understand? I'll need to follow protocol." Tessa nodded, watching as he photographed the unplugged cord, the thermometer readings, the spoiled food. Each click of his camera felt like another nail in her pop-up's coffin. She sat heavily in a kitchen chair as he worked, her mind racing. Who would do this? The kitchen had been locked. Only a few people had keys. Pastor Joy, the custodian, the church secretary. Her phone buzzed. A text from Laverne. "Tessa, are you seeing these posts online?" With shaking fingers, Tessa opened her social media. Photos were already circulating. Close-ups of the spoiled food, the unplugged refrigerator. The captions made her stomach turn. "Health hazard at church pop-up. Unsafe food being served to community." This is what happens without proper oversight. The timestamps showed they'd been posted just minutes ago, but they were spreading fast. Comments piled up, each one a fresh wound. Inspector Reyes cleared his throat, drawing her attention back. He held out his clipboard, his expression professionally composed but his eyes sympathetic. "I have to issue a failing grade for this inspection," he said quietly. "The temperature violations are severe, and any food held at unsafe temperatures must be disposed of immediately. The pop-up will need to be suspended pending a full review." Tessa signed where he indicated, her signature shaky. The official red, failed stamp felt like it was being pressed directly onto her heart instead of the paper. "I would never serve unsafe food," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "I check everything. I follow every rule." "I know," Reyes replied, breaking his professional demeanor for just a moment. "Your logs have been impeccable, but regulations are regulations, Ms. Moore. I have to follow them." He helped her bag up the spoiled food for disposal, neither of them speaking. The sound of plastic trash bags crinkling seemed too loud in the quiet kitchen. More notifications buzzed on her phone. She didn't need to look to know what they said. The story was spreading, exactly as someone had planned. Through the kitchen window, she spotted a familiar figure in the parking lot. Madison Vale, phone in hand, watching. Their eyes met briefly before Madison turned and walked briskly toward her car. Tessa's hands clenched into fists. All her work, all her dreams, all her careful planning, undone by one pulled plug and a few cruel photos. How would she tell Eli? How would she face her volunteers? What would Daniel think? The morning sun now streamed through the windows, cheerful and bright, mocking the darkness that had settled over her heart. Inspector Reyes finished his paperwork, tucking his clipboard under his arm. "I'll need to post this notice," he said, holding up a red sign that read, "Closed by order of Health Department. You can appeal once you've addressed the violations and passed a new inspection." Tessa watched silently as he taped the sign to the kitchen door. Each piece of tape felt like it was sealing away not just the kitchen, but her future, her hope, her chance at something better. The photos continued to spread online, carrying her humiliation to every corner of the community she'd tried so hard to serve. The fall. The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of Café, now closed for a special board meeting. Daniel Whitaker stood at the head of the polished oak table, his weathered hands pressed flat against its surface as he addressed the gathered board members. "The accusations against Miss Moore are unfounded," he said firmly, his usually gentle voice carrying an edge of steel. "Someone deliberately sabotaged that kitchen, and we all know it." Madison Vale sat primly in her chair, arms crossed. "Mr. Whitaker, as your tenant, I must express concerns about the building's reputation. These informal food services are becoming a liability." Daniel's face reddened. "A liability? That woman has shown more integrity and care than—" He stopped mid-sentence, his left hand suddenly clutching at his chest. His breathing became labored, and sweat beaded on his forehead. "Dad?" Ava jumped up from her seat as Daniel stumbled backward, catching himself against the wall. "Someone call 911!" The room erupted in motion. Madison rushed to dial emergency services while Ava supported her father, helping him into a chair. His face had gone pale, his tie suddenly loose around his neck. "Can't catch my breath," he managed to say, still gripping his chest. The ambulance arrived within minutes, its sirens piercing the quiet street. Paramedics burst through the cafe doors with their equipment, quickly assessing Daniel's condition. They lifted him onto a stretcher, attaching monitors and speaking in clipped, professional tones. Ava followed them out, her heels clicking rapidly on the pavement. "I'm riding with him," she announced, climbing into the ambulance. As the doors closed, she caught a glimpse of Tessa running up the sidewalk, having heard the commotion from the church kitchen next door. At the hospital, the emergency room buzzed with controlled chaos. Doctors ordered tests, while nurses hooked Daniel up to various machines. Ava paced the waiting room, her corporate composure cracking with each passing minute. When Tessa arrived, slightly out of breath from the walk, Ava turned on her with unexpected sharpness. "This is exactly what I was afraid would happen," she said, her voice tight with worry and accusation. "Ava, I'm so sorry. Is he—" "He's stable?" Ava cut her off. "But this whole situation is too much stress for him. He's not young anymore, Tessa. He can't keep fighting these battles." Tessa sank into one of the hard plastic chairs, her hands twisting in her lap. "I never meant for any of this to happen." "Of course you didn't." Ava's tone softened slightly, but her words remained firm. "But it is happening. The complaints, the sabotage, the politics, it's all affecting him. He won't stop defending you, won't stop pushing himself." A doctor emerged from the treatment area, clipboard in hand. Both women stood. "Mr. Whitaker experienced what we call an acute stress reaction," the doctor explained. "While it wasn't a heart attack, these episodes can be precursors to more serious cardiac events. He needs rest and minimal stress for the next few weeks." Ava turned to Tessa after the doctor left. "You have to end this," she said quietly. "The pop-up, the community kitchen plans, all of it, please, before it kills him." Tessa felt the weight of those words settle onto her shoulders. She thought of Daniel's kindness, that first rainy day, of all he'd risked to help her dream take flight. The idea of being responsible for his health failing made her stomach churn. Without a word, she left the hospital and walked the familiar path to New Hope Baptist Church. The fellowship hall was dark when she entered, the kitchen still bearing evidence of that morning's inspection disaster. Half-washed dishes sat in the sink where she'd abandoned them to run to the café. Her hands trembled as she gathered her supplies, the recipe box her grandmother had given her, Eli's welcome sign with its cheerful drawings, the clipboard of volunteer schedules Laverne had organized so carefully. Each item felt heavier than it should. The industrial refrigerator hummed back to life, now empty and clean. She wiped down the counters one last time, muscle memory guiding her through the motions. The smell of cinnamon still lingered in the air, a ghost of yesterday's happiness. Pastor Joy's key ring clinked as Tessa removed the kitchen key, placing it on the office desk with a short note of thanks. Her footsteps echoed in the empty hall as she made her final walk through the space that had briefly felt like home. At the door, Tessa paused, her hand on the light switch. The darkness would erase more than just the physical space. It would erase the laughter of children at Eli's craft table, the warmth of sharing meals with strangers who became friends, the pride of creating something bigger than herself. She flipped the switch. The fellowship hall plunged into darkness, and the lingering scent of cinnamon faded into silence. Scene 1. 2 mornings after Daniel's collapse, Tessa sat at her small kitchen table, staring into a cold cup of coffee. The sun hadn't fully risen, casting long shadows across her worn linoleum floor. Eli's soft footsteps padded into the kitchen, his Spider-Man pajamas rumpled from sleep. "Mom?" he asked, sliding into the chair beside her. "I had an idea in my dream." Tessa managed a small smile, reaching out to smooth his wild bedhead. "What kind of idea, baby?" "Remember when that nice man let us sit with him at his table?" Eli pulled his ever-present spiral notebook from under his arm and flipped it open. "What if we made our own table? Right outside the church?" Tessa's hand paused mid-stroke. "What do you mean?" "Like this." Eli's pencil flew across the page, sketching a simple folding table with coffee cups and a sign. "We could call it the kindness table. Give away coffee and maybe some of the bread we still have frozen. And put up a sign that says, 'If you need a seat, take mine.'" Something stirred in Tessa's chest, the first spark of hope she'd felt since the kitchen shut down. "But we can't use the church kitchen anymore, remember? We don't need a kitchen for this, Mom." Eli's eyes shone with that pure childhood wisdom that often put adults to shame. "Just thermoses and chairs. Like a lemonade stand, but with kindness instead." Tessa studied her son's drawing. The simple sketch showed people gathered around the table, stick figures with wide smiles. At the bottom he'd written in careful letters, "Everyone welcome." "You know what?" Tessa stood up, purpose returning to her movements. "Let's do it." Within an hour, they'd loaded their old folding table and chairs into their little red wagon. Tessa brewed 2 large thermoses of coffee while Eli made the sign, decorating it with bright markers and careful lettering. They pulled their cargo the 3 blocks to New Hope Baptist Church, setting up on the wide sidewalk near the corner. The morning air was crisp, carrying the first hints of autumn. Tessa arranged paper cups and defrosted slices of her homemade bread on paper plates. Eli proudly propped his sign against the table. "Kindness table. If you need a seat, take mine. Free coffee. Bread." The first passerby was Mrs. Chen from the dry cleaners, rushing to open her shop. She slowed, reading the sign with curiosity. "Coffee?" Tessa offered, holding out a steaming cup. Mrs. Chen hesitated, then accepted with a small bow. "Thank you. But why?" "Because everyone deserves a warm welcome," Eli piped up, pulling out a chair. "Want to sit for a minute?" Mrs. Chen checked her watch, then surprisingly sat down. Just for a moment. Before she left 5 minutes later, she'd called her nephew to bring over their spare folding chairs and an extra thermos of green tea. The morning unfolded like a flower opening to the sun. Old Mr. Patterson from the hardware store brought coffee creamer and sugar packets. Sarah from the bookstore arrived with a box of day-old muffins and 2 camping chairs. Laverne Pitts appeared with her famous banana bread and a portable card table. People began stopping not just for coffee but to sit and talk. A tired-looking nurse getting off night shift sank gratefully into a chair, warming her hands around a cup. A group of high school students on their way to class snapped photos with their phones, posting about the random act of kindness happening on Cedar Street. Tessa watched in amazement as their simple table grew into an impromptu community gathering. Eli flitted between guests like a happy butterfly, refilling cups and sharing his infectious smile. The morning sun strengthened, and so did the crowd. Dev from the electronics store across the street brought over extension cords so they could plug in another coffee maker someone had donated. A local mom who'd seen the social media posts arrived with her kids and a cooler of juice boxes. "This is better than our pop-up," Eli whispered to Tessa as they watched 3 strangers share their table, laughing over some shared story. "Nobody's checking what anyone's wearing or if they belong." Tessa squeezed his shoulder, throat tight with emotion. She'd been so focused on permits and professional kitchens that she'd almost forgotten the original purpose, creating a place where everyone felt welcome. Pastor Joy appeared mid-morning, taking in the scene with bright eyes. "Well, look at this," she said, pulling a peppermint from her pocket and handing it to Eli. "Reminds me of someone who once said, 'There's room at my table.'" People continued taking photos, posting them online with hashtags like Kindness Table and Everyone Welcome. The images showed diverse groups sharing coffee and conversation, children coloring with borrowed crayons, elderly folks finding rest in the comfortable chairs. Just before noon, a sleek black car drove slowly past the gathering. Through the tinted windows, they could see Madison Vale's frowning face as she took in the scene, the mixed crowd, the handmade signs, the obvious joy. Her car continued down the street without stopping, but Tessa noticed how her expression had shifted from disdain to something more complicated before she disappeared around the corner. Scene 1. The morning sun warmed the sidewalk as Tessa and Eli set up their kindness table outside New Hope Baptist Church. They'd brought 3 folding chairs, 2 thermoses of coffee, and a basket of day-old bread that Mrs. Pitts had contributed. Eli had carefully propped his hand-drawn sign against the table leg. "If you need a seat, take mine." A man in a navy windbreaker hurried across the street, his phone clutched in his hand. Tessa recognized him as Dev, the owner of the electronics shop across from the church. They'd exchanged friendly waves over the years, but had never really talked. "Ms. Moore?" Dev's usually calm face was tight with concern. "I need to show you something important." Tessa glanced at Eli, who was arranging sugar packets in neat rows. "What is it?" Dev held up his phone. "I have security cameras outside my shop. They cover the church's side entrance too." He lowered his voice. "I was reviewing footage from Sunday night, and, well, you should see this." He tapped the screen and turned it toward her. The black and white video showed the church's kitchen entrance at night. A figure in a familiar Elan Café uniform approached, looking over their shoulder before using a key to enter. "That's Madison's assistant manager," Tessa whispered, her heart pounding. "But how did they get a key?" "Keep watching," Dev said grimly. The timestamp showed the person inside for about 10 minutes. When they emerged, they were pulling on gloves, their movements quick and furtive. "I have interior footage too," Dev explained, swiping to another video. "My camera catches part of the kitchen through the window. Look." The grainy footage clearly showed the assistant manager moving purposefully to the industrial refrigerator units, reaching behind them and pulling plugs from the wall. Tessa's hands trembled. "They sabotaged the inspection." "All that food." Her voice caught, remembering the thousands of dollars in spoiled ingredients, the failed inspection, Daniel's collapse from stress during the aftermath. "I came as soon as I pieced it together," Dev said. I know Inspector Reyes has been fair to you. He should see this. Eli looked up from his sugar packets. Mom, are you okay? Tessa squeezed his shoulder. I'm better than okay, baby. Mrs. Pitts, she called to the older woman who was approaching with another thermos. Could you watch the table for a bit? Dev and I need to run an errand. Of course, honey. Mrs. Pitts settled into a chair, patting the seat next to her for Eli. We'll keep spreading kindness right here. 20 minutes later, Tessa and Dev sat in Inspector Reyes's small office at the health department. The inspector's face remained professionally neutral as he watched the footage, but his jaw tightened. How did you obtain these recordings? He asked Dev. My security system archives everything for 30 days, Dev explained. When I heard about the failed inspection, something felt off. I've watched Miss Moore's pop-ups from across the street. She's always careful, always cleaning. So I checked my footage. Reyes rewound the video, pausing on the assistant manager's face. And you're certain this was the night before the inspection? Timestamp's right there, Dev pointed. Sunday at 11:42 p.m. The inspection was Monday morning. They knew exactly what they were doing, Tessa said quietly. Unplugging the refrigeration overnight meant everything would be at unsafe temperatures by morning. They made sure I'd fail. Reyes stood, straightening his tie. This changes everything. He picked up his desk phone. I need to make some calls. Ms. Moore, please wait outside. Mr. Dev, I'll need a statement and copies of these recordings. In the hallway, Tessa sank into a hard plastic chair, her mind spinning. After months of struggling to prove herself worthy of trust, of fighting to create something good for her community, the truth was finally emerging. She thought of Daniel in his hospital bed, of Ava's disappointed face, of Eli asking if they'd lost their café. The hallway clock ticked steadily as she waited, marking minutes that felt like hours. She could hear muffled voices from Reyes's office, Dev giving his statement, phones ringing, official-sounding responses. Her own phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Pitts. The kindness table has a full house. Eli's teaching everyone to spell hospitality. Take your time, honey. Truth needs patience. Tessa smiled, picturing her son holding court with his spelling words, spreading light in his own way. Maybe that's what they'd been doing all along. Not just serving food, but helping people spell out what community really means, one letter at a time. Dev emerged from Reyes's office, giving her a quiet nod as he passed. It's going to be okay, he said. The truth has a way of finding daylight. Inspector Reyes appeared in his doorway, his face showing the first real emotion she'd seen from him. He gestured for her to come back inside. Ms. Moore, he said as she took a seat. We have some things to discuss. The end. Inspector Reyes stood in Elan Café's gleaming kitchen, his badge catching the fluorescent light. 2 police officers flanked him while Madison Vale and her assistant manager sat rigidly at the prep station. The security footage played on a laptop between them, the black and white images stark and damning. The assistant manager's face had gone pale, his uniform collar damp with sweat. Madison's perfectly styled appearance couldn't hide the tremor in her hands as she gripped her coffee cup. That's you on the footage, isn't it, Mr. Peterson? Rhea's voice was calm but firm. The assistant manager looked down at his hands, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. One of the officers, a woman with graying hair at her temples, stepped forward. We have clear evidence of breaking and entering, vandalism, and deliberate contamination of food supplies. These are serious charges. Madison's cup clinked against its saucer. James, just tell them the truth. The assistant manager, James, slumped in his chair. Yes, that's me in the video. His voice cracked. Madison said we needed to protect the cafe's reputation. That woman's pop-up was stealing our customers. Reyes turned to Madison, his expression hardening. Ms. Vale? Madison straightened her blazer, trying to maintain her composure. I never explicitly told him to sabotage anything. I just mentioned that it would be convenient if something went wrong with their inspection. But you knew? Officer Chen pressed. You knew what he was planning? Yes. Madison's carefully constructed facade crumbled. I knew. I gave him the spare key we keep for maintenance. She pressed her fingers to her temples. When he told me what he'd done, I didn't stop him. I didn't report it. The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of refrigeration units, the very sound that had been silenced in the church kitchen that fateful night. "Mr. Peterson," Officer Chen said, "please stand up. You're under arrest for breaking and entering, vandalism, and food safety violations." She began reading him his rights while her partner produced handcuffs. James stood shakily, color draining from his face. "Madison, you said you'd protect me if anything." "Don't." Officer Chen's voice was sharp. "Whatever agreements you had, they're evidence now." As James was led away, Madison buried her face in her hands. When she looked up, her mascara had smeared slightly. "I've ruined everything, haven't I?" "The cafe's reputation?" Reyes asked. "Or your own?" "Both." Madison's voice was barely audible. "But more than that, I hurt people. Real people. That little boy's face when they first came in." She trailed off, then seemed to find her resolve. "I want to make this right. Whatever it takes." Reyes pulled out his notebook. "Start by giving us a complete statement about your involvement. Then we can discuss what making it right might look like." For the next hour, Madison detailed everything. Her initial prejudice against Tessa, her fears about the cafe's image, her subtle encouragement of James's plan. With each admission, her posture softened, pride giving way to genuine remorse. "I'd like to apologize to Tessa," she said finally. "Not just with words. I want to help her succeed." She reached for her phone, scrolling through contacts. "I know people at the Chamber of Commerce, suppliers who could help with startup costs. And," she hesitated, "I'd like to volunteer. Learn from her about what real hospitality means." Reyes made a final note, then closed his notebook. "That's for Tessa to decide. My concern is the health code violations." He stood, straightening his jacket. "Given the circumstances, I'm fast-tracking a re-inspection of the church kitchen, tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Madison looked up sharply. "That fast?" "Justice delayed is justice denied," Reyes said. "And I've seen Tessa's work. That kitchen was spotless before the sabotage." He gathered his papers, tucking them into his briefcase. "The health department isn't in the business of punishing good people for others' crimes." Madison nodded slowly. "Inspector Reyes? Thank you for not being as harsh with me as I probably deserve. The harshest judge of our actions is usually ourselves, Miss Vale." He paused at the kitchen door. "What matters now is what you do next." As Reyes stepped out into the cafe's dining room, he pulled out his phone to call Tessa. The morning sun streamed through the windows, catching the empty tables that had once been declared unavailable. Tomorrow, he thought, those tables, and this whole town, might start telling a different story. He dialed Tessa's number, knowing this call would bring relief after weeks of uncertainty. The reinspection would be the first step in making things right. Not just for Tessa and Eli, but for a community that needed to learn what welcome truly meant. The morning sun streamed through the church kitchen windows, catching the stainless steel surfaces that gleamed from hours of determined scrubbing. Mrs. Laverne Pitts directed a small army of volunteers, her floral apron dusted with flour as she supervised the cleaning crew. "Make sure those corners sparkle, honey," she called out to a teenage volunteer, attacking a baseboard with a brush. "Inspector Reyes will be looking everywhere." Tessa stood at the center island, checking items off her preparation list with methodical precision. Her hair was neatly tied back, and her crisp white chef's coat bore the simple embroidery. Open table. Eli sat at a nearby prep table, homework spread out before him, occasionally glancing up to watch the bustle around him. The kitchen door swung open, and Inspector Reyes entered, clipboard in hand. The room didn't fall silent. There was too much positive energy for that, but everyone's movements became more purposeful, more aware. "Good morning, Ms. Moore," Reyes said, his usual professional demeanor softened by a slight smile. "Ready to begin?" Tessa took a deep breath and nodded. "Yes, sir. We've addressed every item on the checklist." Reyes started his inspection at the entrance, noting the newly installed hand-washing station. His pen moved across his forms as he checked temperatures in every refrigeration unit, examined the cleaning logs, and verified the proper storage of dry goods. Mrs. Pitts kept the volunteers working at a steady pace, but she couldn't help hovering nearby as Reyes tested the dishwasher's sanitation cycle. "That machine's running hot as Georgia asphalt in August," she assured him. Tessa followed Reyes's progress, answering his questions with quiet confidence. She'd studied the regulations front to back, determined not to let a single detail slip through the cracks this time. "Your food storage rotation system?" Reyes asked, peering into a walk-in cooler. "Color-coded labels with dates," Tessa replied, pointing to the clear organization system. "Everything's tracked in the logbook here." Eli looked up from his math homework, watching as the inspector made his way through the kitchen. His fingers crossed under the table, and he whispered something that looked like a prayer. The inspection continued for nearly 2 hours. Reyes tested surfaces for proper sanitization, verified the pest control documentation, and reviewed the proposed menu items against proper cooking temperatures. Finally, he stood at the center island where they'd started, reviewing his notes. The kitchen had fallen quiet, everyone holding their breath. Mrs. Pitts clutched her dish towel like a security blanket. Reyes looked up, his face unreadable for a moment. Then he extended his hand to Tessa. "Congratulations, Ms. Moore. You're approved." The kitchen erupted in cheers. Mrs. Pitts burst into tears, hugging the nearest volunteer. Eli abandoned his homework and ran to his mother, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Mom, you did it!" he exclaimed, his face beaming with pride. Tessa's hands trembled slightly as she accepted the official certification from Reyes. "Thank you, Inspector, for everything." Reyes's professional mask slipped just a bit. "You earned this, Ms. Moore, every bit of it." He glanced around the kitchen. "This is how it's supposed to work. Community coming together, doing things right." Mrs. Pitts was already organizing an impromptu celebration, directing volunteers to break out the coffee and emergency pastries she'd stashed away just in case. Tessa stepped away from the happy chaos for a moment, pulling out her phone. Her fingers shook slightly as she dialed Daniel's number. He answered on the second ring. "Tessa?" His voice was stronger than it had been in the hospital, but still carried the weight of his recovery. "We passed," she said, her voice catching. "We passed inspection." She could hear Daniel's smile through the phone. "I never doubted you would." He paused, and she could hear papers rustling in the background. "Would you ask Ava to stop by my house? I need her to bring over some paperwork." "Of course," Tessa replied, watching as Eli showed Reyes his latest menu drawings. "Are you sure you're feeling up to paperwork?" "For this?" Daniel chuckled softly. "I'd get out of my sick bed." His voice grew serious. "You've earned this, Tessa, every step of the way." Tessa's eyes welled up as she looked around the kitchen, her kitchen now, really and truly, Mrs. Pitts was serving coffee in mismatched mugs, volunteers were hugging each other, and Inspector Reyes had actually accepted a cinnamon roll. "I'll let Ava know," she said, spotting Daniel's daughter taking photos of the celebration with her phone. "And Daniel, thank you for everything." "Just doing what Eleanor would have wanted," he replied softly, mentioning his late wife's name. "She always said a kitchen needs to be full of both love and bleach." Tessa laughed, wiping her eyes. "We've got plenty of both today." She hung up and walked over to Ava, who was examining her photos with a professional eye. "Your father needs you to bring some papers to his house." Ava nodded, her PR-polished exterior softening as she watched Eli share his drawings with the volunteers. "I'll head over there now. This is good work you're doing here, Tessa." "Thank you," Tessa replied, seeing genuine warmth in the younger woman's eyes. "That means a lot." As Ava gathered her things to leave, Mrs. Pitts appeared at Tessa's elbow with a fresh cup of coffee and a knowing smile. "Drink this, honey, then we'll start planning tomorrow's menu. This kitchen's got some catching up to do." Daniel sat in his favorite armchair, a leather portfolio spread across his lap. Sunlight streamed through the living room windows, warming the cozy space where so many dreams had taken shape. Ava perched on the sofa beside him, her usually pristine business suit slightly wrinkled from a morning spent organizing documents. "Are you sure about this, Dad?" Ava asked, her voice gentler than her corporate tone. "It's a significant investment." Daniel's weathered hand smoothed over the deed papers. "Your mother would have loved this, you know. She always said a kitchen should be the heart of any community." A knock at the door interrupted them. Tessa stood there with Eli, both dressed in their Sunday best, despite it being a Wednesday morning. Eli clutched his ever-present notebook, practically vibrating with excitement. Come in," Daniel called out, his eyes crinkling with warmth. "We've got some important papers to sign." Tessa stepped inside, her hands clasped tightly together. She'd pressed her best blouse for the occasion, and her hair was neatly styled. Eli immediately gravitated toward the coffee table, where several architectural drawings lay spread out. "Is this really going to be our kitchen?" he asked, pointing to the detailed floor plans of the corner storefront. "That's right," Daniel nodded. "The Whitaker Community Kitchen, open table. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it?" Ava pulled out a chair at the dining table, spreading out the documents in neat stacks. "I've had our lawyers review everything. The endowment is structured to cover operating costs for the first 5 years, with renewal options built in." Tessa's eyes widened. 5 years? That's so generous." "It's practical," Ava corrected, but her tone held none of her earlier skepticism. "A business needs runway to establish itself, even a non-profit one." Daniel eased himself up from his chair, moving to the table with deliberate steps. "Shall we make it official?" They gathered around the polished oak surface, the morning light catching the fresh ink of the printed documents. Eli stood on tiptoes between his mother and Daniel, watching intently as Daniel picked up the pen. "This first one," Ava explained, pointing to a thick document, "transfers ownership of the building to the newly formed non-profit foundation." She glanced at Tessa. "With you as culinary director and head of operations." Daniel's signature flowed across the page, years of signing construction contracts evident in his confident strokes. He passed the pen to Tessa, who held it like it might disappear. "Right there," Ava guided, indicating the line. "And initial here. And here." Tessa's hand trembled slightly as she signed, but her letters were clear and strong. Eli watched each stroke with fascination, as if his mother were writing a spell instead of her name. "Now the endowment papers," Ava continued, sliding another document forward. "This establishes the operating fund and management structure." As they worked through the stack of papers, Eli pulled out his notebook and began sketching. His pencil moved quickly across the page, adding details to what looked like a storefront sign. "What are you drawing there, buddy?" Daniel asked, during a brief pause, while Ava organized the next set of documents. Eli turned his notebook around. He'd drawn the corner building with a new sign, reading "Open Table," in flowing letters, with people of all sizes and shapes gathered around a long table that seemed to stretch right out the door. "That's beautiful, Eli," Tessa said softly, touching the corner of the page. "Maybe we can use that design somehow." "Actually," Ava straightened up, her PR instincts kicking in, "that gives me an idea. We could involve local artists in the grand opening, have them create murals or installations about what community means to them." She pulled out her phone, making quick notes. "I'm thinking a soft opening for the neighborhood first, then a bigger launch event. We'll need to coordinate with the city for permits, of course." Daniel signed the final page with a flourish. "There, it's done." He looked up at Tessa, his eyes misty. "Sarah would have chosen you herself, you know, for this." Tessa swallowed hard, unable to speak for a moment. Eli slipped his hand into hers, squeezing tight. "I'll need to draft a press release," Ava continued, her business tone belying the smile playing at her lips. "We should emphasize the community aspect, the inclusive vision. Maybe get some quotes from the regulars at the pop-up events." "Mrs. Pitts will want to be first in line for that," Tessa laughed, finding her voice again. Daniel gathered the signed papers, handing them carefully to Ava. "Would you do the honors of filing these with the lawyers?" "Of course." Ava tucked them into her briefcase. "I'll start working on the PR strategy this afternoon. We want to do this right." Tessa looked around the room, at these people who had become so much more than allies. Her eyes fell on the architectural plans, on Eli's hopeful drawing, on Daniel's gentle smile, and finally on Ava's determined efficiency. She pulled Eli close, wrapping her arms around him. Leaning down, she whispered against his curls, "We did it." Scene 1. Transforming the space. The old corner storefront hummed with activity as volunteers streamed in and out, carrying paint cans, brushes, and cleaning supplies. Laverne Pitts stood in the center of it all, her clipboard at the ready, and a bright yellow bandana keeping her silver hair neat. "Now, Jerry, those windows need another round of washing before we paint the trim," she called out to a tall man balanced on a ladder. "And Susan, dear, make sure you're using the eggshell finish in the dining area, not the semi-gloss." Sunlight poured through the freshly cleaned windows, highlighting the progress of the past 2 weeks. The once dingy walls now gleamed with warm cream paint, while deep green accents added a touch of elegance. The commercial kitchen, visible through a wide service window, sparkled with new stainless steel equipment. Eli sat cross-legged on a drop cloth near the entrance, his tongue poking out in concentration as he worked on a large chalkboard. His careful letters spelled out "Kids' Corner Menu" at the top, with playful drawings of smiling cookies and steaming cups of hot chocolate decorating the borders. "How's the masterpiece coming along?" Tessa asked, pausing from where she'd been organizing the storage pantry. She wiped her hands on her work apron, leaving dusty streaks across the fabric. "Almost done." Eli held up his chalk-covered hands. "I made sure to put free hot chocolate for first-timers in big letters, just like at the pop-up." "Perfect," Tessa smiled, her eyes taking in the transformation around them. The contractor Daniel recommended had worked miracles with the space, opening up the floor plan to create what he called conversation corners, cozy nooks with comfortable seating where people could gather and talk. Mrs. Pitts bustled over, making another mark on her clipboard. "The painters should finish the exterior trim by tonight, and the sign company's coming tomorrow morning to install the main signage." She beamed at Tessa. "Daniel's words are going to look beautiful in that custom font you chose." The words would arch over the entrance. "There is always room at this table." When Daniel had suggested the phrase, Tessa had felt tears spring to her eyes, remembering that rainy day at Elan Café when he'd first offered them a seat. "Speaking of seats," Laverne continued, "the delivery truck with the dining furniture is scheduled for 4 o'clock. I've got the high school football team coming to help unload." She checked her watch. "Which means we need these floors finished and dried in the next 2 hours." Volunteers scurried to complete their tasks, the air filled with the sounds of brushes scraping, cloths wiping, and friendly chatter. Even Madison had stopped by earlier in the week, quietly painting baseboards in the corner while avoiding eye contact. It wasn't much, but it was something. Ava walked through the front door, her heels clicking on the protected floor. She'd swapped her usual business attire for dark jeans and a button-down shirt, though she still managed to look impeccably put together. "The health department just sent over the final permit," she announced, waving a document. "We're officially cleared to open." A cheer went up from the workers. Tessa pressed her hands to her heart, overwhelmed by how many people had come together to make this happen. The kitchen she'd dreamed of while baking in her tiny apartment was becoming reality, supported by an entire community. "Look what else came," Ava added, pulling a small package from her bag. She handed it to Eli, who eagerly tore off the brown paper to reveal a brass plaque. "In loving memory of Sarah Whitaker," he read carefully, "who knew that love tastes like home-baked bread." He traced the letters with his finger. "That's Daniel's wife, right?" Tessa nodded, remembering how Daniel's eyes had misted when they'd discussed the dedication. "Yes, honey, and now her spirit of welcome will live on here." The afternoon flew by in a whirlwind of activity. The football team arrived right on schedule, carrying in tables and chairs under Laverne's exacting direction. Each piece was carefully placed according to the floor plan, creating an inviting mix of intimate two-tops and larger community tables. As sunset approached, Pastor Joy arrived to find the space transformed. The walls gleamed, the floors shone, and the furniture stood ready to welcome its first guests. Eli's menu board had pride of place near the counter, and Sarah's memorial plaque waited to be mounted by the door. The volunteers gathered in a circle near the entrance, paint splattered and tired but proud. Pastor Joy stood in the doorway, her warm smile taking in the group of people who had worked so hard to create this place of welcome. She raised her hands, and a peaceful hush fell over the room. "Let us pray," she began softly, "for this doorway, through which so many will find not just food for their bodies, but nourishment for their souls." Scene 1. A new beginning. The morning sun caught the gold scissors as they sliced through the red ribbon. Applause erupted from the crowd, gathered on the sidewalk outside the Whitaker Community Kitchen, open table. Daniel stood next to Tessa, his recovered strength evident in his broad smile. Eli bounced on his toes beside them, barely containing his excitement. "Ladies and gentlemen," Pastor Joy's voice carried across the assembly, "welcome to a new chapter in our community's story." More cheers rose up as the door swung open. The aroma of fresh-baked bread and cinnamon rolls wafted out, drawing people inside like a warm embrace. Veterans in pressed uniforms filed in first, followed by teachers still carrying their gradebooks and regular customers from Café who had supported the pop-ups from the start. Sunlight streamed through the spotless windows, highlighting the careful restoration work. The cream-colored walls glowed, and the deep green accents gave the space a distinguished feel without being stuffy. Eli's chalkboard menu stood proudly near the entrance, its cheerful drawings bringing smiles to passing faces. Mrs. Pitts directed traffic with practiced ease, showing people to various seating areas. "Veterans, we've got your regular corner ready," she called out, gesturing to a cozy nook with comfortable chairs. "Teachers, there's a lovely spot by the window with good light for grading." In the kitchen, the stainless steel equipment gleamed. Madison Vale stood at the industrial sink, wearing a crisp white apron over her designer clothes. Her usually perfect hair was tied back practically, and she worked with focused determination, sorting dirty prep bowls and wiping down counters. "More sanitizer needed over here," Madison called out, her voice carrying a new note of humility. She'd insisted on taking the least glamorous position for the opening, part of her ongoing effort to make amends. Tessa moved through the space, checking on final preparations. The display cases were filled with fresh pastries, each one arranged just so. Coffee urns stood ready, their rich aroma mixing with the sweetness of baked goods. Every surface had been polished to a shine, every detail attended to with care. Daniel's daughter Ava worked the room with professional grace, snapping photos for the press release while chatting with guests. She'd traded her usual corporate suits for a simple dress, looking more relaxed than anyone had seen her before. "Mom," Eli called from near the entrance. "Mr. Johnson from the spelling bee is here." Tessa turned to see her son leading his former teacher to a table. The man who had awarded Eli his ribbon all those weeks ago at Café now sat down with a warm smile, accepting a menu from the boy who had once been too shy to speak up in class. The kitchen buzzed with activity as volunteers moved with practiced efficiency. They'd all trained together over the past week, learning the rhythms and routines that would keep the community kitchen running smoothly. Inspector Reyes stood near the back, nodding approvingly at the proper food handling procedures being followed. "First orders coming in," called one of the volunteers, posting tickets on the line. Tessa took her position at the pass, reading through each one carefully. Her hands moved surely as she assembled the first trays, making sure every plate looked as welcoming as the space itself. Madison approached the pass, wiping her hands on her apron. "The dish station is set up properly now," she said quietly. "I'll keep it organized." There was no trace of her former condescension, just a simple offer of support. "Thank you, Madison," Tessa replied with a genuine smile. "We appreciate the help." The dining room had filled completely, every table occupied with people from all walks of life. The Veterans Corner was alive with laughter as old friends reunited. Teachers graded papers while enjoying fresh coffee. families with young children settled into the kid-friendly areas where Eli's menu promised free hot chocolate. Pastor Joy moved through the crowd, stopping to chat with each table. She paused near the kitchen, watching as Tessa finished plating the first orders. The pastor's eyes glistened with pride as she observed the scene, the very embodiment of the welcome they'd all worked so hard to create. "First tray's ready," Tessa called out, her voice strong and clear. The volunteers lined up, each taking a carefully prepared plate. As they emerged from the kitchen, conversation in the dining room quieted. Then, spontaneous applause broke out as the first meals were served, a celebration not just of food, but of community, perseverance, and the power of an open door. The clapping spread through the room, growing louder as more guests joined in. Daniel wiped at his eyes, no doubt thinking of his late wife and how she would have loved this moment. Eli beamed from his spot near the entrance, while Mrs. Pitts dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Madison kept working steadily at her station, a small smile playing at her lips as the sound of fellowship and celebration filled the space that had once been home to exclusion. The plaque near the entrance caught the morning light, its words a testament to the journey that had brought them all here. "There is always room at this table." Near the front window, a small round table sat empty except for a single rosebud in a crystal vase. A discreet card read, "Welcome table for new friends." The morning light caught the polished wood surface, making it glow invitingly. Eli noticed an elderly man hesitating in the doorway, his weathered hands clutching a worn tweed cap. The man's eyes darted around the busy room, taking half steps backward as if ready to retreat. "Hi there," Eli bounced over, his smile bright and welcoming. "Would you like to sit at our special corner table?" The man startled slightly at being addressed, but managed a small nod. I'm not sure if I should." "That's exactly why you should," Eli said, gently taking the man's elbow like he'd seen his mother do with nervous guests. "It's the best spot in the whole place. You can see everything but still feel cozy." As Eli guided him to the corner table, the man's tense shoulders began to relax. "I'm Mr. Wells," he offered quietly. "Used to teach music at the high school before." "Before what?" Eli asked, pulling out a chair. "Oh, before arthritis made it hard to conduct." Mr. Wells settled into the seat, his cap still twisted in his hands. "Haven't been out much since then." "Well, you picked the perfect day to start again." Eli grabbed a menu from the stack and opened it with a flourish. "Look, we have music nights on Thursdays. Maybe you could come listen?" Tessa paused in her rounds, watching the interaction from near the kitchen door. The scene before her stirred memories of that rainy morning at Elon Café, the sting of rejection, the burn of shame, and then Daniel's voice cutting through it all with simple kindness. "There's room at my table." Now she saw that same transformative welcome playing out through her son. Mr. Wells was already leaning forward, pointing at something on the menu, while Eli nodded enthusiastically. The old teacher's face had softened, years seeming to fall away as he engaged with the boy's natural warmth. "The cinnamon rolls are amazing," Eli was saying. "My mom makes them from my great-grandmother's recipe, and there's hot chocolate with real whipped cream, not the stuff from a can." Mr. Wells chuckled, a rusty sound as if long unused. "Well then, young man, I believe I'll have both." "Excellent choice," Eli beamed. "And maybe later you can tell me about teaching music? I'm learning recorder in school, but I'm not very good yet." "Everyone starts somewhere," Mr. Wells said, his voice growing stronger. "Why, I remember my first clarinet lesson." As the two continued chatting, Tessa moved through the room, checking on other tables. Everywhere she looked, she saw little moments of connection blooming. Mrs. Pitts had gathered several widows at one table, their laughter ringing out over shared memories of church potlucks. A young mother with a fussy baby found herself surrounded by grandmotherly types offering to hold the infant while she ate. The Veterans Corner had evolved into an impromptu story-sharing session, with younger service members listening intently to their elders' tales. Someone had brought in old photographs, and they were being carefully passed around the table like precious artifacts. Near the dessert counter, Madison worked steadily, her movements precise and focused. When she caught Tessa's eye, she gave a small nod, not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement of their shared purpose in this space. The morning light shifted, casting long golden bars across the floor. Tessa glanced toward the entrance and saw Daniel standing with Ava, their profiles matching as they surveyed the room. The tension that had marked their earlier interactions had melted away, replaced by something softer, more accepting. Daniel's hand rested lightly on his daughter's shoulder, and Ava leaned slightly into the touch. They didn't speak, but their shared smiles said everything about healing and new beginnings. In that moment, they looked less like property owner and PR consultant, and more like father and daughter finding their way back to each other. The sight warmed Tessa's heart even more than the success of the opening. This was what the open table was truly about, not just serving food, but creating space for all kinds of reconciliation and renewal. From Mr. Wells' rediscovering community through Eli's welcome, to the father and daughter standing together in quiet understanding, the vision was becoming reality, one relationship at a time. The autumn morning light streamed through the large windows of Whitaker Community Kitchen, casting warm shadows across the bustling space. Tessa moved with practiced efficiency between the industrial mixers and ovens, guiding 3 teenage volunteers through the process of making her grandmother's famous dinner rolls. "Remember," she said, demonstrating the kneading technique, "it's not just about the ingredients. Gran always said love goes into every fold." Her hands worked the dough with gentle precision as the teens watched intently. Sarah, a sophomore with bright purple hair clips, mimicked Tessa's movements. "Like this, Ms. Moore?" "Perfect," Tessa smiled, adjusting the girl's grip slightly. "You've got a natural touch." The kitchen had fallen into a comfortable rhythm over the past few months. Every surface gleamed, and the coordination between stations flowed like a well-rehearsed dance. The walk-in refrigerator was stocked with fresh produce from Henderson's farm just outside town, their first major partnership. Mr. CP.O. Henderson had been skeptical at first, but after one of their no-price nights, he'd become one of their strongest supporters. Through the service window, Tessa could see the dining room filling up for lunch. Veterans from the local VFW post occupied their usual corner table. Since partnering with them for weekly memory pie nights, where stories served as payment, the old soldiers had become fixtures in the community kitchen. Today, Colonel Matthews was teaching 2 young Marines how to play chess while waiting for their meals. "Miss Moore?" Tommy, another volunteer, called from the prep station. "The delivery from Miller's Dairy is here. They sent extra cream again." "Put it in the designated fridge," Tessa directed. "We'll use it for tomorrow's no-price night." These events, where customers paid what they could, or nothing at all, had become so popular that they'd expanded from monthly to weekly gatherings. The regular paying customers more than made up for any shortfall, though Tessa suspected many quietly overpaid to help cover others' meals. The kitchen door swung open as Eli burst in, waving a handful of papers. "Mom, look what Mr. Wells brought for the recipe archive." He carefully laid out several yellowed index cards covered in elegant handwriting. His mother's Depression-era recipes. "He says they're perfect for stretching ingredients when we need to feed more people." Tessa wiped her hands on her apron and examined the cards. The recipes were exactly the kind of practical, nurturing food that had become their signature, dishes that filled both stomachs and hearts. "These are wonderful, honey. Please thank him for me." The afternoon prep continued as Tessa guided her young helpers through Gran's recipes. She shared the little tricks that weren't written down: how to tell when the dough had risen just enough by sight, the exact shade of golden brown that meant perfection, the way to twist the rolls so they'd pull apart easily for sharing. "The secret," she told them, "is remembering that food brings people together. When someone takes that first bite of something made with care, it tells them they matter." At the dish station, Madison, who still volunteered weekly, nodded in agreement as she efficiently loaded the industrial washer. Her designer clothes had been replaced by practical workwear, and her previous sharp edges had softened into something more genuine. The front bell chimed as Ava entered, her heels clicking purposefully across the floor. She carried her tablet and wore a satisfied expression. Making her way to the kitchen, she caught Tessa's eye through the service window and held up a finger in a 1-minute gesture. "Keep folding those rolls," Tessa instructed her students. "I'll be right back." She untied her apron and stepped into the dining room. Ava was already pulling up a document on her tablet. "You need to see this," she said, her professional demeanor barely containing her excitement. "The Harbor Village Gazette just published their weekend feature." She turned the screen toward Tessa. The headline read, "The Table That Changed Harbor Village: How One Community Kitchen Transformed a Town." The autumn evening painted Harbor Village in shades of gold and amber as the last rays of sunlight filtered through the large windows of Whitaker Community Kitchen. Pumpkins and fall flowers decorated the tables, their warm colors echoing the season's harvest bounty. The room hummed with conversation and the gentle clink of plates as people found their seats for the special harvest dinner. Tessa adjusted her apron, smoothing the embroidered open table logo she and Eli had designed together. The kitchen behind her buzzed with activity, volunteers moving with practiced ease between stations, the scent of roasted vegetables and fresh bread filling the air. She watched as Daniel carefully transferred the golden brown roasts to serving platters, his movements deliberate despite his recent recovery. "Need any help with those, Mr. Whitaker?" Tommy, one of their regular teenage volunteers, appeared at his elbow. "Thank you, son," Daniel smiled, passing him a platter. "Just mind they're hot." Madison emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of freshly baked pies, her once pristine cafe manager's outfit replaced by a simple apron. The change in her went deeper than clothes. Her smile reached her eyes now, especially when regulars greeted her by name. The dining room had filled steadily over the past hour. Veterans sat beside business owners, elderly couples next to young families, all the invisible lines that once divided Harbor Village, blurred by shared meals and conversation. Mrs. Preeples. Laverne Pitts held court at her usual table, surrounded by choir members and their grandchildren. Pastor Joy stood at the front of the room, her warm presence drawing everyone's attention naturally. "Before we begin our harvest dinner," she said, "I'd like us to join hands for grace." The room quieted as people reached across tables and aisles, forming an unbroken circle of joined hands. Even the kitchen staff paused their work, stepping into the doorway to participate. "Dear Lord," Pastor Joy began, her voice carrying clearly through the space, "we thank you for this abundance, not just of food, but of fellowship, for hands that prepare, hearts that welcome, and the gift of sharing your table together. Bless this meal, and all who gather here. Amen." "Amen," the room echoed softly. Daniel moved to the carving station, where the roasts waited. His knife moved with skilled precision as he began serving portions. Ava stood nearby, helping to plate each serving, their once strained relationship now comfortable enough for peaceful collaboration. The door chimed, and Eli looked up from where he was refilling water glasses. A family stood in the entrance, a mother and 3 children, their clothes worn but neat, uncertainty written on their faces. Eli set down his pitcher and hurried over, his welcoming smile bright. "Hi, I'm Eli," he said, already reaching for menus. "We've got a perfect spot for you." The mother hesitated. We saw the sign about the harvest dinner, but we're not sure we can." "The corner table is our welcome table," Eli explained, using the gentle tone he'd learned from watching his mother. "It's always open for new friends, and tonight's a community night. Everybody eats, no questions asked." Relief softened the mother's features as she let Eli lead her family to the special corner table, the same one where Daniel had first welcomed Tessa and Eli months ago. The children's eyes widened at the festive decorations and plates of food being carried past. Madison approached their table with a tray of pie slices, her serving technique now as polished as it had been at Café, but her demeanor warmer. "We've got apple, pumpkin, and pecan tonight," she told the children, who stared at the desserts in wonder. "And hot chocolate with whipped cream." "But dessert comes after dinner," their mother said quickly. "On harvest nights, we sometimes mix things up a little," Madison winked, setting a pie slice in front of each child. "Makes the magic last longer." Across the room, Inspector Reyes sat with several city council members, their animated discussion punctuated by appreciative bites of food. His routine inspections had become friendly visits, though his standards remained appropriately strict. The A-grade certificate hung proudly by the door, beside the framed photo of Daniel's late wife and the plaque declaring, "There is always room at this table." Dev from the camera shop came in with his elderly mother, calling greetings to familiar faces. Colonel Matthews pulled out a chair for them at the veterans' table, where an intense chess match was underway between two regular opponents. The room filled with the sounds of community, laughter, conversation, the scrape of chairs, and the percussion of silverware on plates. Children darted between tables, trailing the scents of cinnamon and sage. Volunteers moved efficiently through the space, refreshing coffee cups and clearing plates. Tessa paused in her rounds to watch the scene unfold. The harvest decorations caught the last rays of sunset, casting a warm glow over faces that had become as familiar as family. Where there had once been careful distance and polite barriers, now there was genuine connection. The corner store that had stood empty for so long now pulsed with life and purpose. Through the kitchen door, she could see young volunteers learning her grandmother's recipes, their hands covered in flour as they shaped dinner rolls. On the wall hung Eli's original Hope menu sketch, framed beside the current week's specials. His newest drawings showed tables surrounded by stick figures of all sizes, each one smiling. Madison moved between tables with grace, stopping to chat with guests who had once been denied seats at her café. She'd found her own path to redemption through service. Her former focus on exclusivity transformed into a talent for making everyone feel special. Daniel worked steadily at the carving station, his practiced hands ensuring every plate went out with care. Occasionally, he would pause to rest, and in those moments, his eyes would sweep the room with quiet satisfaction. The legacy he'd created in his wife's memory had grown beyond even his hopes. Pastor Joy circulated through the room, carrying not just plates but also prayer cards, gentle words, and that particular kind of listening that made everyone feel heard. She stopped to squeeze Tessa's shoulder as she passed, a gesture of support that had become familiar over the months. The family at the corner table had relaxed now, the children's faces bright with pie and wonder, their mother engaged in conversation with nearby diners. Eli continued his hosting duties with pride, making sure every newcomer felt as welcomed as he and his mother had been that rainy day at Elan Café. Tessa breathed in deeply, savoring the mingled aromas of home cooking and fellowship. The room before her, once divided by invisible lines of class and custom, now moved as one gathering, unified by shared meals and simple kindness. Laughter rose above the gentle clatter of dishes, and the sweet scent of cinnamon rolls baking for dessert promised more warmth to come. If you enjoyed the story of Tessa Moore, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please, don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.